else? Any more water?
No, I'm
No?
good.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
here's your call light for you.
All right, thank you.
All right.
This sure is nice. You know, nursing hasn't always been like this. It's hard to believe that nurses started out as an unrespected and uneducated profession. In the 1800s, it was common for one to look down on a nurse the same way that they look at a prostitute. Nursing was usually carried out by the men of the church, and women were not supposed to have an education. The woman's place was in the home. But then there was this lady who came out of nowhere. In fact, she was the person that no one would have even guessed was going to change nursing. Here she came from a wealthy family who didn't want her to attend the new school in Germany for nursing, but it still didn't stop her. Her name was Florence Nightingale, and she would set the tone of nursing throughout time. So she finished the 3-month program at Kaiserswerth, Germany, and became superintendent for the Institution for the Care of Sick Gentlewomen in Distressed Circumstances. Whoa, I mean, she really got to it, helping nurses' reputations and making accommodations to allow nurses to do what they're good at, and leaving the small stuff and time-consuming stuff to others, like carrying trays. Heck, she even developed the first call bell. In 1853, the Crimean War began. There were so many casualties, and Florence Nightingale was actually requested to come and help care for the injured. She introduced cleanliness, and along with her friend Mary Seacole, they cut down the casualty rate over half. In 1860, the first school of nursing arose. It was the first real model for nursing education. It was only a year program, but this is where nursing theory really came into practice. In 1849, hospitals were brought over to America, along with nursing. In 1861, the Civil War began. Florence Nightingale advised the American Secretary of War how to set up hospitals for the wounded soldiers. Society thought that the nursing system was ineffective, but the soldiers sure were glad to have the nurses to help them. In 1873, 3 schools sprang up in the U.S. Bellevue Training School for Nurses in New York City, which created better patient care. The second school was Connecticut Training School in New Haven. It also was set up for better patient care. The third school was Massachusetts General Nurses Training School. It was created for women to set up career opportunities. In 1889, the Johns Hopkins Hospital opened. It wasn't until 1893 that the first formal nursing school was set up. It was a practical nursing program. It was called Ballard School, and it opened in Brooklyn, New York. The program was 3 months long, and the education focused on home health specifically for the chronically ill, invalids, children, and elderly. The graduates were known as attendant nurses. Then, in 1893, Lillian Wald set up another school, known as the Henry Street Settlement. It was also in New York. She taught the basics of cleanliness and communicable diseases. And that's all I've got to say about that.
Oh, what were you talking about over there?
Oh, I was just talking about the history of nursing up until the 1900s.
Oh, I love the 1900s. History is my favorite. I'll take it from here.
All right.
So, you know, in 1901, states started adopting state nurse associations. And hopes were that if each state had one, that it would allow passage of laws in the nursing profession and would put organizations on the map, which it did. And also in 1902, first public school nurse that was hired was Lena Rogers. And it actually started as an experiment, but when Lena Rogers decreased the absent rate of children, it quickly spread throughout the country. In 1903, North Carolina passed the first Nurse Registration Act, and 3 other states followed. In 1909, the University of Minnesota opened a nursing school as part of the university rather than a hospital, which created an alternative to hospital-based nursing schools. The Metropolitan Life Insurance Company creates the first health insurance with Lillian Wald. Customers didn't die, they got better, spent more money. Nurses and hospitals were compensated for work took off countrywide in 1911. In 1917, the United States entered World War I. The Committee on Nursing and the American Red Cross collaborated to create a plan to meet the military needs of nurses and also the civilian needs of nurses. In 1918, college graduates can earn nursing education in much shorter time due to the country's nursing shortage through the Vassar Training Camp. Army Nurse School is established also to take care of military need. In 1920, nurses in the Army received a rank for the first time. Hey, that study from 1912 that I was talking about, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, in 1923, they finally finished it and published it, and it initiated more universities to hold nursing programs. Isn't that cool?
Oh, wow, that is really cool.
Yeah. In 1928, that's when they first started grading nursing schools. And then in 1929, Wall Street crashes. In 1934, a committee published an activity analysis of nursing, which basically made a detailed job description that schools could use to develop and plan classes and objectives. In 1935, the Social Security Act passes a portion of it which provided funding for nurses to get public health education. And then in 1937 is when World War II began. In 1938, the Manual of the Essentials of Good Hospital Nursing Service was published. In 1944, the GI Bill of Rights was established, giving nurses returning from World War II an incentive to further their education for free. In 1945, World War II ended. In 1946, the Hill-Burton Act passes, funding construction of new and old hospitals, making them more available to the public and not just for serious cases. In 1947, the economic status of registered professional nurses is published and finds that registered nurse numbers are very low. A different report concluded the pros of two-year programs, giving way to the associate's degree of nursing.
Hey, I'm in that. That's where that came from?
Of course.
Cool.
And then in 1952 is when the first associate degree program opened. And in 1953, critical care units are started.
Are you talking about nursing?
Yeah.
I love the history of nursing. Oh, you guys left off at the Vietnam War, right? Well, in 1957, the National League of Nursing established a council of practical nursing programs. The accrediting services began to be offered in 1961. In 1961 to 1973 was the Vietnam War. The nurses had to provide care in bug-infested tents. They wore white duty uniforms that were very hard to keep clean due to poor hygiene. The nurses had very little clinical experience, less than 6 months, and were practicing things they had never learned. In 1965, the American Nursing Association moved towards the two levels of nursing, professional and technical. In 1979, the National League of Nursing published its first list of competencies. These were the base of what knowledge nurses needed to know in order to graduate and partake in the NCLEX, which is the licensure exam in clinical care. In 1990, unlicensed assistive personnel were becoming more popular for patient care. These workers were required to work under the license of an LPN or an RN, and they were only allowed to be delegated certain tasks. In 1995, full-time positions in hospitals decreased and nurse-to-patient ratios increased. In 2000, the LPN demand in hospitals dropped, but spiked in long-term care facilities due to the fact that hospitals were requiring further education. The ADN and RN graduates are on the rise, and the American Association of Colleges of Nursing is pushing for graduates to enroll in BSN programs within 5 years of graduation of ADN. Lots of history involved there.
I love history.
When I am no longer even a memory, just and vague, I hope my voice may perpetuate the great work of my life.
Well, folks, that's not the end of the story. In fact, there's a lot more history to be made. And guess where it starts? With you.